Okay, well, good morning. I'm going to kick things off by looking at Paisley's lost heritage. Paisley's got sort of an ancient historical background going back long before the Abbey's founded in 1163. But this morning I'm going to concentrate more on the industrial sort of heritage. But before I do that, what I thought I would do, if you can hopefully see the slides, is actually give a quick recap of what we've been doing for the witch hunt, looking at Christian Shaw, who sparked off everything in 1196. We've got a small historical research team, and we've been looking at the Christian Shaw's background. We've now acquired a copy of the Privy Council or the Circuit Court minutes into the investigation, and we're going to start transcribing that from the 17th century handwriting so we can get a good idea about what's actually happening at the time. Last year at the Witch Hunt Conference, I told everybody that we'd found Christian's first husband, the Reverend Miller, and we said it was probably buried out in Kilmore's parish church in Ayrshire. We've now found evidence that he's actually buried in the old Erskine church, which is now Bishopton parish church down at Erskine itself, in the Shaw family burial plot. But we've searched the graveyard there, we cannot find the Shaw burial plot. It will be there somewhere, but it's not marked nowadays. But the most interesting bit when it comes to sort of the industrial heritage of Paisley and Renfrewshire is Christian Shaw's involvement in the thread manufacturing. We always knew she had started it off with the Bergavin Thread Company, but her importance in its development to Renfrewshire and Scotland is becoming more apparent as things go on. I'll come to that in a minute. One big question we've always had is, why did Christian end up in Edinburgh? We know that she dies there in about 1737 and she's buried in Greyfriars Kirk. And we always ask the question, why did she go there? And the answer is thread manufacturing. In 1725 or 26, the Scottish government at the time the Privy Council set up the trustees of the Board of Manufacturers to invest in manufacturing and develop manufacturing in Scotland. And in their minutes we find a Mrs. Miller giving suggestions on how to improve thread manufacturing in Scotland. And then on the 12th of April 1728, we find a minute where Mrs. Miller is to be paid £50 sterling as a salary in full for the year 1st of April to 1st of April the following year as a new Edinburgh spinning school mistress. Whereas the spinning school in Glasgow's mistress was only paid £30. So even in the 1700s, there was a price difference in salaries between Glasgow area and Edinburgh. There was a big difference then. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this. These are actually the entries out of the minutes of the trustees. I just put these in for a minute or two, but this is one of the earliest, 6th of October 1727. And it's basically saying Mr. Donaldson and Mrs. Miller were discoursed upon spinning. They were talking about how to work with spinning. I'm just going to get my notes, which I forgot about. But it goes on through things. 3rd of November 1727, they're recommending to some of the board members to meet with Mrs. Miller of Johnston, who is now in town, now in Edinburgh, and to bring her proposals for spinning and twisting thread to the committee. So as if they were taking her quite seriously as how to actually deal with improving things. So that's a wee bit about the research side of it. We've not done a lot more yet, but hopefully within the next few months we'll get on to and do an awful lot more. But what I want to do now, if I can go back the way a wee bit, is have a look at the ghosts of Industrial Paisley. I think that's a good way of describing it. In 1970, a relatively young Sylvia Clark moved to Paisley to take up a position with the engineering department of the then Paisley College of Technology, which is now the University of the West of Scotland. One of her first personal tasks she embarked upon was documenting all of the surviving sites within Paisley that were of interest to industrial archaeologists and consequently of interest to historians of Paisley's industrial revolution. Her book was reprinted in 1988 by the Local History Forum, and I put the cover of it up on the screen here. And in the preface to this edition, she writes about her first edition. She says that she was struck by how many places had disappeared or fallen into the last stages before demolition, since John Butt had written his Industrial Archaeology of Scotland about 15 to 20 years previously. And she went on to say that by the time she was asked to revise the work, round about 1986-87, that she was struck by the completeness of the destruction which had been accomplished. And that sections she wrote under were sort of a valid base for investigating, as it were, the ghosts of Industrial Paisley. And when you look through the book, you're struck by the number of entries which are basically updated with the words demolished. About 50% of the sites had gone within a sort of a 20-year period. In some ways, this small volume now needs a revision again, even sort of 15 years down the line, just to see what else has actually disappeared or what has escaped the original survey. What I want to do, I'm going to centre the first part of this talk just looking at one small area, and that's the area just to the north of Gilmer Street Railway Station. I've put it in the satellite picture to give you your bearings a wee bit. This is the corner of County Square with the station sitting in here. The white cart just almost straight down the middle of the picture. It may surprise you to know that since about 1600 there were numerous efforts made to keep the white cart navigable from Paisley all the way down to the River Clyde. Though Paisley was always fighting to find the financial resources to maintain this. It will probably surprise most of you here today, though, that shipping activity could be found at the heart of the town, with places like the Old Common Quay and the Newtown Quay, which are here. This is the Newtown Quay over here, the Old Town Quay's on this side. Actually maintained shipbuilding right up until World War II almost. There was still records of ships being built on the banks of the Cart during the Second World War, possibly just a bit further down. And I'm going to concentrate in this area to have a look at what was actually there before. The map's not perfect, but I've tried to keep it as similar to the satellite picture as possible. You can see County Square down here in the railway station, the white cart running down the middle again, and when you look at it, there's industry all over this area. There are many interesting cultural and industrial buildings shown in this map. It can tell us a lot about the development of Paisley in the late 19th century, which have totally now been wiped off the face of the earth. I've already mentioned two of the two quays which sit just in here. They're not actually mentioned. There's one mentioned in here. I'll show better pictures or maps as I go on just now. But what I want to do is look at 6 or 7 key sites within this area. The first one here is the Paisley Poorhouse. We had two poor houses in Paisley. One was the Abbey parish, which was out towards the site of the current RWH hospital. And then you had the Paisley Poorhouse, which was at the heart of the town almost the opposite way around, so you would expect. So we'll have a quick look at the Paisley Poorhouse. Down here, we've got the St Mirren Soap Works. I've got the Paisley Iron Foundry, almost opposite the poorhouse. Across the water from St Mirren Soap Works, we've got the Paisley Soap Works. Over here, in this area, we have got the Abercorn Works, which is more well known in historical sources. This small site here, which is very important, but probably nobody's ever heard of it, and that is Paisley's Theatre Royal, just in the heart of the industrial area. And then there's a dye works sitting up here, which we'll have a quick look at, and a very small building over here. I've not even given it a name. I'll come to that later. So I'm going to have a quick look at these sort of 6 or 7 sites before I go on and have a look at anything else. So if I start off and have a look at Paisley's Poorhouse, it's not so much the history of the sites that I'm going to look at, it's more where they were, what's there now, looking at what's been lost from the past. In May 1752, the parish of Paisley opened the Borough Poorhouse on the site just west of Snedden Street. This is Snedden Street running down here. And it sat between Middle Lane and Hospital Lane, which you can see quite clearly on the map. The Town Council and the local trade societies contributed to its cost, and they also incorporated a lunatic asylum on the site. You've got the poorhouse main buildings in here, and I think the lunatic asylums, the buildings to the left, they're not particularly mentioned on the map itself, but we know they were there. The site today has nothing on it other than a car park. I've overlaid the map with the satellites. It's a bit bright in here still to see it properly. To give you sort of locations, this is the one-way system, and I'm trying to get my own bearings. This building here is the BT Exchange on back New Snedden Street now as it is, and you've basically got the car park, and the poorhouse and lunatic asylum is mostly based on the car park area. And there's another small car park off to the right hand side as well now. If I change pictures, you'll see it a lot better. You've got the car park showing up clearly now, and the whole sort of poorhouse and lunatic asylum filled this area here. Unfortunately, the buildings here are more modern, again built after the poorhouse came down. The site's just it's the car park now. St Mirren Soap Works, if I can get into it. I've not dug up any historical information in the company at all, but in Paisley, with the weaving industry and the cotton industry, you get a lot of associated works with it: soap works, linen works, silk works, dye works, and we had quite a number of soap works. You can see this is Snedden Street, I think, coming back in here, Christie Lane up at the top. So a lot of the street names are still there today, which helps it makes it easier to identify what's actually happening. You can see the soap works sitting there. Sit it on again, and you'll maybe get a better idea about its position. This doesn't help that much, but it's backing onto the River Cart. This is the bridge, and this is Gilmer Street Station sitting right here. So all of these buildings, that's the old Carnegie's nightclub, sitting there sort of derelict now. Christie Lane is a small lane that runs from the street down towards the river, so it was all in this area here. On the opposite side of the river, where you can just see the grass coming in, oh sorry, forget that, I'm jumping downriver to the Paisley Foundry at the moment. Opposite the poorhouse, you can actually see some of the poorhouse being detailed here, the matron's rooms, the boardroom. Yep, all sorts of funny rooms, but I'm more interested in the Paisley Foundry. Ironworks and heavy industry played a great part in Paisley's past as well. And you can see here the Paisley Foundry with a dressing shop, their office, the smith's shop, the engine house and its chimney. Again, it's all gone. You've got Harbour Lane sitting in here and Quay Lane. The small car park off New Snedden Street there is the site of it. Here's Harbour Lane running back down to the harbour as it would have been, all car parking again. Excuse me. This is back up to Snedden Bridge. We've got the St Mirren Salt Works on the left-hand side of the river and the Paisley Salt Works on the right-hand side. If I can skip through to that. Again, I've not gone into the company's background. A lot of these companies have left a sort of historical documentary trace, but I've not traced it as such yet. It's a major project to look at the industrial heritage of Paisley. And when you just look at these, you can see there's so many other wee things coming on. We've got Southcroft Works appearing to the side of it. All sorts of different industrial works, all connected to the sort of ironworks, the salt works, everything else coming in. Again, this is almost all gone. When these satellites pictures were taken, the site of the salt works was open space. And within the last couple of years, it's been redeveloped into sort of social housing. If I click on it, you can see it there. It used to be the weighhouse, the weighbridge for weighing all the trucks and everything coming in. That was its most recent use. And this picture almost just shows the old weighhouse office sitting there by the looks of it. Excuse me. If I go on to the Abercorn Foundry, this is one which we do know a fair bit about. It was owned by Baron McNabb, and they made iron ships from the hull to the engines, as it was described in the literature. You know, almost in the heart of Paisley, they were constructing the iron ships and launching them into the White Cart water. The foundry was later purchased by a company called Hannah, Donald and Wilson, who were gas engineers, marine engineers and general experts. In other words, if somebody wanted them to do something, they would do it. But in the late 19th century, they also owned the Abercorn shipyard on the Newtown Quay. By Sylvia Clark's reprint of the industrial archaeology of Paisley, the remains of the foundry had gone completely. It had been suggested that the wall, in fact, if I quickly show you the site of it now, this is a site here. It's actually on the site of Walnook Church. If I go into it, it's this area here. It has been suggested that this wall, which sits beside the BB headquarters, dates from the foundry period. But if you actually look at it on the maps, the wall's much later. When we did sort of courses at the university looking at Paisley's archaeology, it was always said that that's what it was, but when you look at it, there's no way it could be part of the foundry at all. And I slipped the BB logo in because today's actually the 130th anniversary of the founding of the BB. But again, it's part of Paisley's heritage. It was founded in Glasgow on the 4th of October 1883, and within 6 months, the first Paisley company was founded. And they're still going strong. The last time I looked at their website, they'd actually increased the number of boys attending, and the companies were beginning to rise again. And of course, without the Boys Brigade, there would be no scouts or guides. So it all goes on from different things. But that was a sideline. I think this is the most interesting bit of this area of the town. The Theatre Royal. You can actually see it sits beside the Abercorn timber yard and joiner's shop. And opposite you've got the Abercorn Foundry. And within the area there you've got the Theatre Royal, which by about 1888, 1889, it's not there. It's gone completely. These maps all date from 1856, so it's maybe got about a 40-year lifespan. It could have been there a lot longer. It could have been there from sort of the late 18th century. I don't know. I've not been able to find any information about it at all, other than it appearing on the map. The site of it today is occupied by what was originally built as the Paisley Tramway Power Station. This big red building sitting in the middle here. And you can actually work out, they can actually just about make out the outline of the theatre itself. Actually ties up nicely with the edge of the road. If I move on to the main sort of satellite picture, this is the old, the power station as it was. It was later sort of Oldfields, I think it was. They were sort of a general merchants. But this was the site of it. But the road itself, if you followed the pavement down and followed this dotted line down, that's the original street line. So the theatre itself encroached on midway into the road. It would be great to find out more about the theatre itself. The only thing I've been able to find so far is this person here, Sarah Thorne, who lived between 1836 and 1899. And this was just a quick search of the web. And it says in 1865 she appeared in reading roles, blah, blah, blah. And she appeared at Paisley Theatre Royal. But she was obviously from sort of England, and she did a lot of Shakespearean bits and pieces. So there must be more information about the theatre out there somewhere. So it's something if it's worth a lot more investigation. Oops, getting caught. I think I'm getting close to the end of this quick run through here. The dye works of the Abercorn factory. Again, you can see the Abercorn factory sitting down in a corner here. You've got, I can't make it, Abercorn Place, I think it is in there. And you've got gardens. One of the things that comes up is you quite often find lots of mansion houses dotted into the industrial areas. Because quite often they were there before the industry started building up. You see it a lot more when we're working in the M74 extension project in Glasgow. The area around about Scotland Street was all major mansion houses and bowling greens, and then within 10 years it was industrial foundries and ironworks that were on the site. So you see that appearing in Paisley as well. You probably had a house here at one point and have preserved the gardens for so long before they've disappeared as well. I've chosen this area in particular for one reason. This is a one-way system again coming through, and you've got a car showroom in the left-hand bank of the river here. This is, I think it's Little Tots Nursery, to give you your bearings. Halfords is just off to the right-hand side. And this is a demolition yard as it is now. They take scrap metal and all sorts of things in through gates, and they sort it all out in the yard before it's processed on. If you look at the map, if I go back to the map again, you've got the Abercorn Foundry, a factory rather, sitting in here, and it says underneath it thread, which to my mind means it's a small thread mill. Probably quite an early one. I reckon this is probably a sort of 18th century thread mill. And beside it, in the dye works, you've got a storeroom. Now, click through. You can't really see much in this. Ah, that's a problem. Right, here we go. So this is an older picture. This picture is probably taken about 1950s. This is a storeroom sitting in here. I have a sneaky feeling this building is probably one of the oldest buildings in Paisley now. It's probably sort of 1700s and date, and it's Brady's that have it. It's a skip hire company mostly. Building looks quite good in that picture. But if I could show you the one that's hiding, give me a second and I'll see if I can get it. Probably not. I don't really want to end the slideshow. I'll come back to it. I'll show you it at the end of the slideshow. But the building is in a perilous state now. The roof is almost all gone. You can actually see the roof dipping in. So it's a building that should probably be on at the Buildings at Risk register. But if it was conserved, it would be a great sort of part of Paisley's heritage being preserved. Grady still use it. When I walked past it the other day, one of the workmen was actually been in the front door. And I was thinking, that's not a safe building to be entering from my archaeological background. But it's there. And this building to the right of it's probably part of the dye works, which still survives today. So that's a quick look at that area itself. One other thing which comes up from Hamilton Street is Paisley's early railway. This is the Paisley to Renfrew railway line. The map at the left-hand side of the route's sort of more modern. When it was founded in the 19th century, it was founded in April 1837, so it's one of the earlier railways in Scotland. It started at Hamilton Street and went all the way down to Renfrew Wharf and the shipyard sidings. It opened with 3 locomotives, one called the Paisley, one called the Renfrew, and the third was called the St. Rowlocks, originally made by the Robert Stevenson Company for the Garnkirk and Glasgow Railway. So they were pulling an engine in from somewhere else. And at the time, the locomotives gave a speed advantage over using the river cart to take things down to Renfrew. But in 1842, a matter of 5 years after it opened, it switched to horse haulage. But the original railway never made a profit, and the line was leased out to other companies for use. In 1846, it was agreed to be taken over by the Paisley, Barrhead and Hurwit Railway, and it goes on until in the 1960s, with the beaching cuts, it was closed. This is Hamilton Street in here in the map, and you can actually see the terminus from about 1837. This is Abercorn Street running down here, heading towards Paisley Harbour as it is now. And the Vulcan Works, which is now the site of Arnold Clark's showroom in Glasgow Road, Renfrew Road. And just in the opposite corner you'd have Halfords, but you can see the terminus in here, and you've got a couple of sheds for all the goods coming in and out. When it opened, it was a goods railway. Like most of the railways in Scotland, they were mostly for goods. They were never originally intended for passengers. So this was really a goods station. But when it was the line was purchased and integrated into the main Paisley to Glasgow line, this is the site, so this is actually the site of a rope works, and the railway station is in between. But at Hamilton Street, you've got parts of the station wall still surviving. And surprisingly, the ground has hardly been touched since the station shut. That's the edge of the station wall sitting in here. Inside, you've got the rope works in one area, and this is part of the station here. And beyond that fence, you can actually follow the railway all the way down to Renfrew. You can virtually walk it down. This is more commonly known. This is Abercorn Station. You recognise the building just to the right as Reedcare College on Renfrew Road. Nowadays, you've got what was Great Mills, and it's now the BM Home Store off to the left-hand side here with the big car park. But Abercorn Station was added, and this was a branch line running from the original railway to meet up with the Paisley to Glasgow line. Abercorn Station has been acknowledged by most railway historians as the first passenger railway station in Scotland, deliberately built for passengers. This was it from the opposite side. You can see the college sticking up in the background. This is it today. The branch line's closed, it's waterlogged, the station's all gone. But the platforms are still there. Oops. I thought I had another picture showing the station being demolished, but I don't. But again, sort of the railway heritage of Paisley is quite good. Although it's more modern, it's 19th century, there's a lot of railway capitalism going on with lines such as the circular route, which was never really used, going round through Glenburn down to Hawkhead. The stations were there and built, but hardly ever used. And that's another talk completely. But we've got lots of other sort of industrial heritage. Car manufacturing. If you think about car manufacturing in Paisley and Renfrewshire, you automatically think about Hillman and then Peugeot Talbot and everything at Ringwood. But we're making cars in Paisley long before that. I'm going to talk about one person in particular, or two companies in particular. One of them's involved with running cabs. Anybody got any ideas? Nope. What was that? Nope, definitely not. Actually, that's the one. One of Scotland's most famous engineers, Sir William Arrow. If I can get onto this here. This is a picture of one of the older surviving Arrow Johnston motor cars, produced around about 1901 in Underwood factory in Underwood Road in Paisley. Sort of it's turn of the 20th century. The Underwood factory was later destroyed by fire, but it was used for quite a while. Sir William Arrow was a local man. He was born in Houston in 1839. And he started working in cotton mills at 9 years of age. And he started training as a blacksmith by the age of 13. So he quickly moved on from working the machinery to actually figuring out how it actually worked. And he went on to learn mechanics and hydraulics at school. And in 1863, he joined a company of bridge manufacturers in Glasgow. And by 1872, he had established his own business in Dalmarnock Ironworks in the east end of Glasgow. And in the late 1870s, he went on to found Sir William Arrow and Co., a leading international civil engineering business. And of course, he's most famous for the Forth Rail Bridge. But he was involved in lots of other things, such as the Tower of London. He died in 1913, and he was buried in Woodside Cemetery. I'll come to that in a minute, but this is an aerial photograph of sort of Oakshaw. There's the John Neilson Institute. Underwood Road would be, is actually hidden from view here. The Underwood Road actually runs along this line here. And you've got the two railway tracks coming across there and there. And in here, between the John Neilson Institute and the railway, this area in here is the Underwood car factory. All gone, of course. But that was I've blown it up a wee bit to see it. You can just about make out, there's St James's Church on Underwood Road. A very big car factory. The car factory itself was later purchased by Beardmore's, who were a big sort of multidisciplinary company, as we would call it now, into aircraft manufacturing, trains, all sorts of things. And they went on to produce the first London cabs up in Paisley in the Underwood factory. I think I've got a picture coming up, but this is Sir William Arrow's gravestone in Woodside Cemetery. And there's one of the Beardmore taxis, which was built around about 1920. I think this was the Mark II. I was trying to find the first one. I couldn't find that. But they became very popular in London. I've deliberately tried to stay away from the textile industry because it's not really a forgotten industry. Everybody in Paisley and Renfrewshire knows it's been there. And a lot of people know, well, we know about the destruction that's happened to both the industry and its building over the years. And those that do survive have been preserved in some ways, such as the small shop cottages and the larger mill buildings that still scatter the landscape. Of course, I put up the half-time school here, once described as the finest half-time school in Europe. And of course, it's sitting there waiting on something to happen to it eventually. Who knows what? But there's lots of other types of industry within Paisley. I mentioned right at the start silk. That was a fairly dominant Renfrewshire industry at one point in time. And one of the factories was the Blackhall factory. And underneath, you can see it here, it says for silk throwing. Blackhall sits in the opposite bank of the Cart to the Anchor Threadworks. It's just on this map, the Anchor Threadworks are just over here. You'll know it better today as Morrison's supermarket at Roan End. And the petrol station for Morrison's actually sits in this area of ground here. Blackhall is one of the survivors of the silk throwing industry in Paisley. Established in 1760. That's okay. No problem. This is a later map of it. You can see the buildings surviving quite well. This is a satellite picture of there. You can see the Morrison's petrol station here, and the buildings remain intact today. The silk throwing industry was established in Scotland in Paisley in 1760. There was an attempt in Perth about 200 years previously, but it failed. The Blackhall mill itself was owned by Harvey Brand & Co. of Glasgow, so it was a Glasgow company operating the mill in Paisley. And before the arrival of cotton and the Paisley shawl, silk was one of these industries that was starting to dominate the town, as it had gradually replaced linen as the main textile of the town. Semple's History of Paisley, written in about 1780, when the silk gauze trade was at or near its sort of zenith, or at the top of its scale, there were 18 silk manufacturers in the town, 6 of whom belonged to London companies, and about 8 out of the remaining 12 had London warehouses. So they were making the silk here and sending it down to London for sale. Brown's History of Paisley states that Paisley, there's a photograph of the mills in about the 1950s. This is the interior courtyard. And I still never got a picture of the main buildings itself. But this gives you an idea about the amount of rooms in the town. 1760, there was 2,500 silk rooms in Paisley, compared to linen or rawn at 1,500. In 1881, it was near enough 5,000 silk rooms, compared to 2,000 for linen. So it was quite a dominant sort of industry at that point in time. The actual Blackhall silk mills are probably at risk now. For the greater part, from about 1960 through to about the 1980s, they were occupied by one of the last shipbuilders in Paisley, Seadreck, a company which designed and built dredgers for across the world. It was an offshoot of the Simons Robinett shipyard in Renfrew. But they have now moved into our offices in the Abbey Mill complex. And if you look at the actual buildings, if you're down at Morrison's, you'll see the windows are smashed and parts of the roofs starting to come away and things like that. But I just put this up to give you an idea about the value of the trade in the town. So 1787, the value of the silk industry was about £579,000 of the manufacturing in the town, of which £350,000 was attributed to silk gauze. If you were looking at that in today's figures, it would be millions, not just thousands of pounds. And it was estimated that there were 5,000 silk weavers and such like. Excuse me. Another mill which we had in Paisley, away from the big two of the Coates and Clark's families, was the Bankend mill at Carlile, Quay. Anybody heard of that one before? Nope. Part of it still survives too. This is the mill building itself. And I've highlighted it on here. This is a station, again, up in the map at the bottom corner. And if you were to go down New Snedden Street, you'd come to a sort of a junction where it heads off to the left. And the mill sat at the corner of the... it's actually on the turn of the cart, and you actually get into what is called Carlile Quay. And you've got Carlile Place, which runs down, and the Bankend mill occupied the site there. Crossing the river, you've got what was the second bascule bridge on the cart, which, after they stopped bringing the ships up into the centre of Paisley itself, they actually removed all the lifting mechanism from the bridge, and it was left as a normal footbridge. The footbridge, or the bascule bridge, actually sits just to the left of this bridge itself. This is a pipe running across. But this is the Bankend mill being demolished, taken by John Hume, probably in the sort of 1950s. If you go down to it today, the first level of the wall still survives. I've got a picture of it coming up. The site itself is better known as being a site of Pete Road Motors on New Snedden Street. Those that have been in the town for years would know it quite well. It was Waterway, a taxi showroom. Of course, it lies derelict now. I feel as if I've actually lost half the picture there. But this is actually the corner. That blocked up window is actually the edge of the building. There should be a lot more showing there. For some reason it's not showing. You can see it in that one a bit better. That roof line is actually one of the cooperative warehouse buildings at the other side of the street. There we go, that's a bit better. You can see this is Carlile Place running down, and you've got the remains of the mill with the blocked up windows. And the bascule bridge is actually at the bottom of the road here. What was I actually going to say about it? Not much. This is Carlile Quay. You can actually see the mill building site in here, and you've got modern housing built on the sites behind it now. Carlile Quay was one of the bigger harbours for the town. And of course you can look at it in this picture and see the amount of silt that has built up in it now. I can't remember how long ago it is since these houses actually went up. I think it's about 3 or 4 years, something like that. They spent a lot of money sort of doing the quayside up. And even in this picture you can see the amount of overgrowth and weeds that are now growing in the site. Oops, I thought I had another picture which actually showed you looking down. And you can see it there with the cobbles and all the weeds growing amongst the cobbles. It's not somewhere that you would want tourists going to visit now, but it should be a heritage site looking at in the town, somewhere to go and see. And it could be a nice small harbour with a few private boats tied up in it and all sorts of things. But it's not somewhere, even walking down it, I had good walking shoes on and I was slipping in the cobbles with all the overgrowth and the moss on them. I should probably have started with this one at the beginning, but never mind. I'm coming to the close of the talk now. The barony of Renfrew. This is the earliest map we have of Paisley and Renfrewshire. Made late 16th century, it's 1550, 1600, that sort of time period. If you zoom into it, you can quite easily make out Glasgow, further up the Clyde, the royal borough of Rutherglen across the water. At the centre, we've got the town of Paisley and the Abbey. And down on the river, we've got Renfrew and Whiteinch and Kingsinch, with the royal castle sitting on it at this point in time. If I can get into the talk. When you study the town plans of Paisley, you can actually start to lose track of what you're looking at. You keep seeing something new to go and look at. If you look at this map, I don't know how well you'll see it, but you can actually start, there's Potter House, Potter Hill, as it would be now. A lot of the place names, there's Corsbar. You've got Walkinshaw down here, Middleton Farms, North, South and Mid-Candron Farms. A lot of the places in this map are still there today in the landscape. But again, if you go into somewhere like Paisley Museum, you don't see this. It doesn't give you an idea about the landscape and how Paisley and the area has developed over time. There's me zooming into Paisley. For a specific reason, this is probably the way Paisley would have looked. Even 100 years later, in the 1600s, when Christian Shaw makes her accusations about the witch hunt, Paisley is not a very big town. We've got the monastic complex round about the Abbey. You've got the High Street running up, finishing at a church at the top of the High Street at the junction with Wells Street. You've got St Mirren Wynd running down to a wee open square, and then Moss Street, or Moss Row as it was called, heading down towards the Paisley Moss. And right on the corner you would have had the Paisley toll booth, where most of the accused in the witch hunt were held before their trial and execution. But this is our first proper sort of view of Paisley from about 1693, engraved by John Svezer, a German, I think he was German. He actually produced a whole series of illustrations for the whole of Scotland. This is Paisley taken from the top of Saussel Hill. Again, you can see the remains of the Abbey down in the corner here. A lot of people say this is a high church in Oakeshaw, but this is Paisley toll booth. The high church isn't built about 1770, something like that. So it's about 100 years before the high church is even constructed. And I think this is probably Cossey Side Street running out from the town. Just a few small cottages. If I zoom in, there's a toll booth sitting amongst the town. It's not very big, it's only probably about 3 to 4 stories high. At this point in time, it's all timber. It's not a stone building, it's a timber building. Further down, this wee bridge here is the Abbey Bridge. Effectively still the bridge today that crosses just in front of the town hall where the piazza is. It's the same site and supposedly the same bridge, but it's been completely reconstructed over time. You can just about make out the road leading up the High Street coming through there. Then you get a view of Paisley Abbey, the nave of the Abbey. By this time, of course, the tower and the choir have fallen down. And it's not until 1929 that it's all fully restored. But around Abbey Close, all you can see is a maze of buildings and other sort of industrial workings as tenement, housing, all sorts of things, obscuring the Abbey from sight. I didn't put the pictures in, but even in sort of the 1850s onwards, the people of Paisley were thinking about their heritage and actually purchasing all of these properties and demolishing them so that you could actually get a better view of the Abbey. These buildings all appear in sort of 1700s, so at that point in time they were all conceived as being modern. And then, of course, they get rid of it all to open it up and let everything be seen again. So, coming to a conclusion, thoughts on Paisley's lost heritage. I took the thought of, if you're a visitor to Paisley and you don't know anything about the history of the town, where do you go to find out about it? My first thought was Paisley Museum. But you go into Paisley Museum, it doesn't really tell you the story of the town at all. You can go in and you get lots of information on Paisley shawls, Paisley between the World Wars, and the destruction and the rebuilding of George Street in sort of the 1950s and 60s. And there's other wee things scattered about, but there's no sequential history. Where did the town originate? Just wee questions. What did the early town look like? And of course, I've just shown you the Sweezer's view of Paisley in the 1700s. Who were the main players in the early years? Who founded the town? When did the abbey begin to dominate life in Paisley? How did the town grow? What happened during the Reformation, 1560 through to 1600? When did early industry begin to grow in the town? All of these sort of questions are key aspects of Paisley's history and heritage. And without going and physically digging into the 19th century histories of the town, you don't get the story at all. And I said, but where do visitors find out about it? The loss of major industrial sites has played its part in the loss of some of our heritage. Buildings such as the Half-Time School now lying in ruins. Most of the old Fergusby Mill complex, although some of the good small buildings still survive. The old county buildings in jail in Gilmour Street. If you could think about County Square with the old jail still standing rather than the piazza, or even the facade of it, it would make us look more like some of the English, towns of the same period. A nice heritage centre in the town. Even things like the old shop units in the corner of Gauze Street and Ron Street, which were a few of some of the oldest buildings in Paisley until the demolition a few years ago. I think I'll show you a picture of that in a minute or two. Even things like the canal sites could be interest to tourists, and of course it's all hidden now by the cycle path and housing estates. But we know parts of it do survive at Fergusby Mills with one of the sort of docks, and bits of the canal still survive at Hawkhead, but do visitors actually know they are there? When I was working in the M74 extension archaeology project, we actually excavated part of the Port Eglinton terminus of the canal. And to our surprise, we actually found that parts of the canal were still surviving below ground. And it's the sort of thing, if you could find a bit of the canal within the Paisley area, it would be good to investigate it elsewhere down the line. But again, it could be another sort of heritage drawn to the town. And even old graveyards are a great heritage resource. A lot are filled with weeds and overgrown. I mean, we've got there's a couple of them up in Oakshaw. I know one's recently been sort of cleared out. I think it was the Gaelic Cemetery. I forgot to check that comment out before. But it's a good example of what can be done. And just to finish up, last Thursday night, I went to a book launch in Wachwinnock at the Castle Semple Visitor Centre for this book called Fire and Sword by a local author, Louise Turner. It's set in 15th century Scotland, and it follows the fortunes of John Semple of Elliston as he fights to defend his inheritance, the title of the Sheriff of Renfrewshire, and later as the First Lord Semple, following the Battle of Sauchieburn in June 1488. For those that don't know, it's a true story set in John Semple was the Sheriff of Renfrewshire in the 15th century, and they play a dominant life in Renfrewshire's history. And at the book launch, we had this person on the right-hand side, Lord Jamie Semple, the 21st Lord Semple. So the book's all about his ancestor, the first Lord Semple. It's not often you can get something like that happening. But Jamie Semple now lives in Edinburgh. He runs a bed and breakfast house. And at the book launch, he was sort of chairing the event. He said within the last few years, he has actually started to get involved in genealogy and taking tours around Scotland. And he said one of the greatest tourism drives in Scotland, as far as he's concerned just now, is genealogy. People from all over the world are tracing their ancestry back to Scotland, and they want to come and see the graves and towns where their ancestors came from. And what he was basically saying was what's the point of having them all come to see these things if all they can see is modern buildings and no heritage? I mean, they want to know what it was like where their ancestors were in the town. Of course, you can't really do that unless you can get into the collections and through all the old photographs themselves, which if you're coming in a quick whim, you don't see at all. But I mean, I put in here, this is Oakshaw. And I think in this picture you can actually see two graveyards. There's one sitting in here. And there's another one down here, all covered by trees. It's very hard to see them from the satellite pictures. But again, almost inaccessible to people. You can go and have a look at them, peek over the wall and see in. But again, it's good to go and see them. And you've got other cemeteries like the old Abbey Cross Cemetery sitting beside the town hall, where you can go and see the stones and see a lot of the early Paisley burgesses and manufacturers' tombstones. But sometimes when you go down there, you don't want to go near it for all the kids sitting in the stones and everything else. So you've got to try and sort of boost everything that way.